All right.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So anyway, I had in my head that that would be a great ground cover. It was pretty. And I thought, well, I knew it was aggressive. I guess I didn't realize it was invasive. And you really have to know where you're going to put this. And our backyard is all woods. So we put little plugs in the backyard, and it started to spread. It wasn't super established yet. And I saw Marcia's backyard, and I thought, I need to get this out of here. I have selected the wrong spot, for sure. And perhaps I don't want to use this at all, but at least not in the location I selected. So this is a picture of my backyard. And as you can see, this is a recipe for disaster. So because it's only a few years that it was transplanted, I have been able to remove the bulk of it, and I'm watching for it, and I'm pulling it as I see it. But I think that I'll be able to control this and just get it out of here and put in a native ground cover. And I'll just show what it looks like a little closer. And can you see my arrow? You can see these little pieces. That's what I'm now just, here and there. I've dug out the most of it, and I'm just pulling these out as they come, and I am burning them. That's what it kind of looks like. It's very webby. And then I'm gonna come out of here just a moment to show you the video. Okay, that's behind here. And we'll start at the beginning. And this is just so you can see how it pulls out. And hopefully you can hear.
I'm going to attempt to show you this, but I don't know how this
There's
video is going to turn
taping
out.
by myself. So,
Okay, so
while I was pulling. So
I'm pulling it out.
And see that it's kind of shallow roots, and then it goes a little
usually
ways
kind of
and dips down
a
again.
source towards the middle.
And there's one area that might be a deeper root.
Trying to be
We don't see the video. We can just hear you.
This one looks like there's a
Okay.
source.
I thought you could see it. Oh, I know why. Sorry. I know why.
I'll burn it.
I just have to switch it.
And if I get a good clump, I might transplant it to a safe spot. You can see the
Okay,
roots.
hold on. I'm sorry.
Get out what you can.
Because I need to share now.
This one looks like that's kind
Here we
of
go.
the main spot.
Can you now see it?
Right there.
No.
I don't know if you can see that, but it looks kind of bigger than the others. You can see the root.
Oh, here we go. Okay. You see?
I'm going to attempt to
Okay.
show you this, but I don't know how this video is going to turn out. Okay, so I'm pulling it out. There's usually kind of a source towards the middle. I rip that out, trying to be kind of careful. Yeah, this one looks like there's a source. Some of this I'm just going to throw in here, and I'll burn it. And if I get a good clump, I might transplant it to a safe spot. You can see the roots. Get out what you can. This one looks like that's kind of like a main spot. Right there. I don't know if you can see that, but it looks kind of bigger than the others. You can see the root. And got out most of it. And time will tell if it's gonna pop back up, but then you can also just dig. It's kind of shallow. The roots are fairly shallow, so that's one positive. All right.
Okay, so now I'll just go back to this. Right here. And share, back to this. Share. Okay. That was the video. And then here's the pictures. I took some inside so you can kind of see the roots. This is where most of it ends up. Burning it mostly. And then, so initially I thought, oh, I'm going to move it over here where nothing really is growing. And you can see with just little plugs, it did fill in pretty nicely. This is by my compost. I still don't think this is the ideal spot. I'll probably be moving it again. I've decided that probably the best place if I'm going to use it is right here, where it's really contained under this tree. And you can see our yard. That's the spot where it's really an island. And my native plants are along the front. Oops, I didn't mean to move that. And this is my pollinator garden. And I looked into a couple alternatives for ground cover because I won't be seeking this out again, that's for sure. Here is, help me out. I've got foam
Canada
flower.
anemone?
Yes, Canada anemone. So I'm thinking that I would like to try these instead for
Foam
ground
flower.
cover. Yeah, foam flower and the Canada anemone. So yeah, the moral of the story is there's some better options.
And you've done all this just by pulling it out, and you say that that works
Yeah.
pretty well, that they don't appear to come back too bad.
Not too bad, but now keep in mind that my plugs, they were put in only a few years ago, less than 5 years ago. So if you have something that's super established, you may have a different experience, but I think I caught it where I'm looking for it and it's coming out. I'm not going to have it by the woods. Yeah. So, but you do, I think you have to be kind of vigilant because I know it, it can kind of pop up. So, but it is pretty distinctive. And one tip I have, if you are trying to remove it, is that in my area where I had it, I used the leaf blower just this week. So in the fall, when a lot of things die back, it's easier to spot it because it's still there.
Underneath the leaves. Yeah.
Under the leaves. So I just blew the leaves away and I could spot it more easily in the fall because it didn't have as much competition. You're not it's not buried under something else. So
wonderful.
At least in my spot, I had an easier time, just kind of doing my double check. Did I get it all? And I didn't, so I pulled up the rest. So anyway, that's my backyard.
Does anyone have any questions for Danna? Just shout it out. Okay. Danna,
apologies for this is my first time using Keynote on Zoom, so sorry for that.
That's okay. I've never used Keynote on Zoom either. I'm glad it wasn't me.
All right.
Well, do you want to stop sharing then?
Yep.
And
back over here.
And Tom Oliver can start his presentation.
All right. How do I stop right here? There we go.
All right. So give me one moment to get this started up.
Oh, in the chat, just so people know, Lisa Solomon suggested spring blooming phlox, and there are some native phloxes that would do nicely with Canada anemone and foam flower. And Jane Stieber, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, suggested using wild violets to replace Vinca.
All right, Marcia, is that up?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Good to me.
First off, let me introduce myself. My name is Tom Oliver. I work at Michigan Tech in the Center for Science and Environmental Outreach. I am not here as a representative of Michigan Tech. Marcia and I were talking last year about my yard situation, and I had mentioned that I was trying some interesting and different techniques to get rid of Vinca, which I had been really working hard at because it's a very established couple patches at my location. And she then asked me if I'd be willing to come in and share some of the stuff that I've done. At this point, I don't fully know if it is completely wiped out, but it is pretty close and very manageable for me at this time. And when I put this slide up to begin with, Marcia asked me to explain how I got this slide. When she entitled this presentation as Vinca Wars, the only thing I could think of was that kind of World War II sort of vintage patriotism type stuff for being involved and being supportive of the military. And so I asked ChatGPT to make a picture of in that style for Vinca Wars. So that's how this was done. But before I continue, I want to say, my wife Kay and I, we moved back to the area back in 2020, and we had bought a house that is probably about 20 minutes from Houghton. And it was a well-established, well-gardened area from a person who some people on this chat might know. I'm not going to mention that person, but if you happen to look and recognize our house or our yard because of pictures you may have seen or may have visited it, I am not in any way disparaging the previous owner for the invasive species that I'm dealing with right now. It is just one of those things that I've got to do. And so I'm dealing with a large number of species on our property. And this kind of sums it up. There's Vinca, goutweed, tansy, Dame's rocket, Chinese lantern plant, Japanese barberry, black locust, everlasting pea, burning bush, lily of the valley, field bindweed. I've got at least 3 different species of exotic grasses, purple loosestrife, spotted knapweed, Eurasian water milfoil, which is actually being taken care of by the township. They are working at herbiciding that in its place, and Norway maple. The ones that I've crossed out with a strike through are the ones that I've at least got to a manageable point. Some of them I've eliminated completely from the yard, like the 2 Norway maple trees that were planted. I cut them down and just basically round up the stump so they wouldn't come back. Spotted knapweed I've been actively pulling for every year, every summer, and this year I only had 1 plant that I had to pull out. Japanese barberry, I removed 5 bushes of Japanese barberry, and as of this summer I don't have any more of those, but there could be seeds that are in the seed bank that might sprout in the future. I don't know. But Vinca is one of the ones that has been very, very challenging for me to get rid of. And I'm a person who's I'm very supportive of the idea of integrated pest management. In other words, I like to try the things that do not use herbicides as much as possible. But if I can't get something under control, I will use herbicide in a means that I try to reduce its impact on the soil or any of the surrounding vegetation. So with that sort of stuff being said, the 2 primary areas of concern that I had for Vinca, they are small in comparison to some places where Vinca is located, but down in this area here is an area where there's like a flowering crab tree planted right near the house, and the whole area underneath it had a number of other plants growing up through it. There was some ostrich fern, there was oh gosh, lots of goldenrod that was growing there. It was quite a lovely spot, except it was completely packed in with Vinca all around. And I tried going in and pulling it out and working at it that way, and it just, I could not get it under control in that means. And then this area underneath this tree was kind of a landscaped area that had been planted with Vinca, and mixed in with it is false Solomon seal, and a couple other native plants that I really wanted to keep. And so in both cases, I was trying to find ways to deal with these where I could keep plants that I wanted and get rid of the Vinca, and pulling and digging was just not doing the trick. So the methods that I used was, first and foremost, underneath that flowering crab tree, my father-in-law had a temporary shelter that was made out of vinyl, and he was using it for storing like his tractor under it and all that sort of stuff. And a winter storm ripped it to shreds, and he was going to throw out all the big panels of vinyl. And I asked him if I could have them, and I basically covered this for only 1 year. It was covered like this starting early summer 2023, and then early this past summer, I pulled it up to see how it was going. And if it wasn't very impressive to me, I was just going to leave it. Well, as it turned out, everything was dead underneath it as far as I could tell. It had baked under hot summer sun. And so then I decided, well, if I could rake up all of the detritus that had come about from that, I could watch it and basically spot treat any of the Vinca that started coming back, either by pulling it or just giving it a quick spurt of herbicide. And so I raked all that up, and I burned all the litter in my fire pit. And the results of it basically was, I just needed to spot treat 10 regenerating plants. And that was taken care of really, really well. Unfortunately, Everlasting Pea has now moved in, and I'm dealing with that because it's a pretty aggressive plant. I think some people don't mind it much, but I find it problematic. And so I actively try to get rid of that. So I'm now dealing with Everlasting Pea, which is in there. And the added thing that was a bonus, because I only kept it covered for 1 year, is the ostrich fern actually survived, and it is growing up quite nicely. And I'm looking forward to that continuing on. Now, I got a typo there. Sorry about that.
Okay.
The second treatment area was around this clump of trees over here. And I didn't have a before shot on either of these because I didn't plan on actually giving a presentation on this. So I've basically got, with this one, all I have is the post-treatment photos. And so what I did, and this was the unique part of the treatment, was this past winter, because there was hardly any snow on the ground, the thing that I noticed was that the Vinca was still very green. It was an evergreen situation. And I thought with the warm conditions, it might be photosynthesizing and actually not being dormant. And while all the other plants around it were dormant, so all the native plants that I had there were dormant and gone. And so I thought, my choices are, I'm either going to cover this and it's going to likely kill off everything, or I can try to spray during the winter while we had those warm conditions and not impact the other plants that are currently dormant. So I sprayed this with a herbicide mixture last winter. I would say it was probably either mid-January or February, somewhere around there. I can't remember the exact date. And then my intent, and you can see here in this picture that I've raked away all the litter of the stuff that had died and any leaves that were there that they could hide under, all that sort of stuff. I raked that all up, and then I burned all of that in early May. And then any spot treatment or any new growth that I saw coming up, I tried to spot treat before any of those other native plants were coming up. Once the native plants were up, I was planning on just pulling things. Well, the way this turned out was I only needed to spot treat 5 regenerating plants. It killed off almost all the vinca, and all the other plants had survived. That included yellow trout lilies popping up early in the spring, and Solomon seal, false Solomon seal. There was a number of plants that it was great. I won't completely act as if this was perfect. The Solomon seal and the false Solomon seal, you could clearly see that they had been impacted in some way. They grew up and they grew in funny positions and directions and stuff. So they were damaged a little bit, but I think with I'm expecting that next year they're going to be coming up growing normally as they had before. But this technique, as clearly as a pure experiment on my part, I had no idea what to expect from it, but I thought I had nothing to lose, since if I did it during the growing season with covering it, I was going to lose everything anyway. Turned out to be really, really a great thing, and I really felt pretty fortunate about that. If anybody is interested, I know that vinca can be a hard thing to kill with herbicides sometimes. This is the concoction that I made up, the cocktail that I made. In my 1 gallon sprayer, I put a 1/3 cup glyphosate, 1 cup triclopyr, and 2 teaspoons of surfactant, along with a spray indicator so I could see where it was going. And then I brought all that up to be the volume of 1 gallon with water being added to it. And what I've found with this is, not only is this working with the vinca, but the goutweed that I have in my yard, I've been battling that also. And the goutweed, unfortunately, is very close to a stream. So I'm not spraying at that location at all. Instead, I'm using this same concoction, but I'm wearing dish gloves with cotton gloves over the top of them, and I dipped my hands in the glove. First, I mowed all the goutweed back, and as new growth was coming up, I was just basically wiping my hands the gloves were soaked with this. I was wiping them on the plants. I did that for every individual plant, and where I did that, it basically eliminated the goutweed. The only reason I can't say that goutweed is gone is I found 2 new patches this summer. And so my plan is for next summer to really work hard on getting rid of that goutweed. But this worked really well. It was a kind of an unconventional way of approaching things. And for my case, it happened to be pretty fortunate and worked out really, really well.
Tom, are these the brands that you used?
Yes, this is exactly what I got all this from Erickson's, because I know that like glyphosate and triclopyr, sometimes if you get different brands, you might get a different concentration or something like that. But I got all of these from Erickson's, and basically it's the instructions that are on these particular brands for dealing with vines. And I used those concentrations and gave that a shot, and it turned out to work pretty well. And that's everything I have there. Does anybody have any questions?
I just think it's so great that you were able to do it in winter.
It totally surprised me, and certainly I don't hope that we have those opportunities again in the future, because the only reason it worked was we had no snow, and I'm a snow lover in this area, and I would rather have the snow, but I just I saw the opportunity and thought I would experiment with it and see if it worked, because honestly I wasn't even sure if it would work, because usually these, like the triclopyr, only works while the plants are growing. And so so there must have been photosynthesis happening. They must not have been completely dormant. And it just happened to be that I picked the right time to be able to take care of it. I feel pretty fortunate about it.
So what were your temps that winter?
What's that?
What were your temperatures when you were spraying?
Oh my gosh, it must have been high 30s, low 40s.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was January and February. We had some very warm temperatures. If you're not here in the Keweenaw, we had very warm temperatures at that time.
And virtually
Yeah,
no snow. Mhm.
I live in the mountains, so we usually have snow. We had snow today, actually.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, it was a very usually I've got 3 feet of snow on the ground at my house here, and I didn't have hardly any, and so even with those plants, I didn't even have to remove any snow off of them to be able to spray. They were completely wide open, exposed to the air. It was a really weird winter.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And would
Yeah.
you do me a favor and email me that recipe?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be happy to.
Okay. Well, I will do my best to share my screen and give my little presentation on how I deal with or have dealt with Vinca. And pardon me. There we go. Okay, yes, this is my Vinca Wars. I too moved into a house that had lots of Vinca. And I know that the people who lived here first, earlier put it in, but they had no idea what it would do. And I live on almost an acre of land, and I think that the Vinca has took over maybe not half an acre, but maybe a quarter to a third of an acre. And it was thick in spots and spread out in spots. It was extremely difficult. Okay, and I used based on where the Vinca was and how thick it was, I used a bunch of different techniques. Sometimes I just pulled it right out. Sometimes I smothered it with cardboard and wood chips and just left it there for a long time and planted through it. I did get some rugs from Kisma, and I just left it in some places longer than a year. But when I just ignored it for a while, that did a good job. And then, but because I had so much to deal with, and because I don't have that kind of energy anymore, I also resorted to using a broadleaf herbicide, triclopyr. Okay. Now, excuse me, let me see if I can make this more visible to you guys. Okay, well, about the rugs were super easy and effective. They're ugly and they take longer than the other methods, but they don't, it's almost no effort. You do have to watch out for Vinca poking through, but something else to be aware of is they do kill everything. You are not going to have any false Solomon seal coming up after 2 years through that. This is the side of my yard, and it represented what a lot of my yard was like. And this is what it looks like now after being smothered by rugs for probably 2 or 3 years. As I have noted at the bottom of this slide, if you don't replace the Vinca, the other unattractive things will come back. And I'm not too worried about that because it's a challenging site. And I know that once I get the, proper things in there, that the Vinca will, if it's not gone forever, it'll fade into the background. Okay, one good thing that you can do is put in new ground cover. And I wish I had a newer slide to show you here, but what I put in this spot was Packera aurea, also known as golden groundsel. And you can see these little starts in here amongst all the dead, not rhizomes, what do you call them? The above ground stems that Vinca spreads with. And that area is all filled in now, and there is some Vinca, but it's not taking over because the Packera is a real aggressive plant as well. This space here, and again, I don't have a before slide, was almost 100% Vinca. And to add insult to injury, there was a bunch of plastic landscape fabric underneath it. So removing that whole business took a couple of weeks of regular work, almost every day, pulling a yard out at a time. But once we got the Vinca out and the plastic out, then we went to Kirkish's, which is a really great source for cardboard, and covered it all up with that, and then put some wood chips on it. And the next year we started to plant through it. And that was probably back in 2020. The wood chips are almost gone. Every once in a while a Vinca shows up, but I just snatch it out of there. It'll eventually disappear if I live that long. Okay. But for a lot of my yard, I had to resort to chemical warfare. Well, I didn't have to, but I did, because it just was more than I could handle. And this is a technique that was recommended by Vern Stevens. He is the founder of Designs by Nature, and yes, it's the father-in-law of Michelle, who has UP native plants over in Marquette. And he recommended using Garland 4 Ultra, which is an ester form of triclopyr, for waxy leaves like the Vincas. And he uses a 4% solution per gallon of basil oil. And when he told me basil oil, I thought it was like, oh, as opposed to oregano oil, but no, it's actually sort of, it's, I guess the closest thing to it would be kerosene, except for it costs a lot more than kerosene. And I mixed all that and put it in a backpack sprayer and sprayed it on throughout my backyard in May, when the Vinca was up, because they recommended that the triclopyr be used when the temperatures were above 50 degrees. I suspect it works at lower temperatures based on what Tom has said, but it probably works a little better when it's warmer. After that, you're supposed to rake the area, because you'll have a bunch of dead Vinca, and spray again. I didn't really do that because my area is so huge, and I just couldn't handle the idea of raking 3/4 of an acre to find more Vinca. A good thing about just using the Garland 4 Ultra is it's a broadleaf herbicide, and it does not kill sedges and grasses. So you don't have to worry too much about protecting those plants if you've got them in your yard. But yeah, it is lethal to broadleaf plants. Now, this was my smart idea of taking a panoramic picture of my backyard, and it kind of loses the effect, but you can see that there's green all the way along the ground here, in back of the tended backyard and all the way across. It's probably 150 feet altogether. That's what I was dealing with. And this is really what most of it looks like now, because I've been treating it for a few years. It's in the woods, and that's really why it's taking so long, because the Vinca pokes up through the leaves, and when I spray, some of the leaves aren't, or some of the Vinca isn't visible, and then it comes up later. So this is a process. And of course, there's always issues when you're using this sort of chemical. I've been concerned about amphibians, but I haven't been able to find any good information on it. So I was just kind of careful. One thing I did read was that they are repelled by it. So I thought, well, good. If they are repelled by it, then they're not going to walk across it. It is bad for fish, but it breaks down really quickly. Not as fast as glyphosate, but within about 10 days. I did need to reapply, like I said. I couldn't find out any real health impacts, but I wore gloves, long sleeves, and eye protection, especially because I was working with the oil, and that's no good to get in your eyes. But, you know, on the upside, this stuff really works. And other types of vegetation are starting to show up in that area. I'm really happy to see some partridge berry starting to spread all over my yard. Okay, and just yesterday, I got an email from a friend of mine who is dealing with Vinca in a slightly different way. And he's using Danna's method. And if you can check this out, this is actually like a bale of Vinca. And he said that he tried to smother part of it under cardboard and 6 inches of wood chips, but for him, it didn't work because the Vinca just got under the wood chips and then started to climb up through the mulch. And so what he did was he just started lifting the Vinca at the edge of the infestation, sort of like Danna did in her video there, until he was sort of pulling up an edge of the Vinca mat, and then he rolled it on himself, onto itself, not himself. And eventually he was able to pull up a good sized patch in about an hour or two, actually. And as he says, I left the massive roll of Vinca to dry in place and will drag it away this fall to burn. And he said 3 months later, he hasn't seen any signs of Vinca returning. He says if he were to do this again, he would probably use a garden knife or a hori-hori to cut it into more manageable strips before attempting to roll it up. But okay, that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
So, Marcia, I got a question about your friend's roll of Vinca.
Yeah.
I wonder if, because like with mine, the roots were really embedded deep into the soil. Like there's no way I could have done that. I wonder, do you think maybe it was that they were just rooted in the leaf litter that was there and so was able to pull it up relatively easy because they were getting their nutrients from the decomposing leaves? Or
Well, his experiment is only 3 months old, so we shall see.
okay, yeah, because I like that, and like even with Danna's, I looked at how shallow the roots for hers were, and I was like, oh, I wish that would have been the case for mine. So that's kind of interesting how variable it can seem to be.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I was digging up pretty deep roots of Vinca in my front yard in one of the areas where it had been
Yeah.
planted and just completely taken over.
Having seen what you are dealing with, I feel as though I'm an amateur, and so I'm very impressed with how you've been moving forward and the fortitude it must take to keep moving forward on that. I appreciate that.
Well,
Yeah,
I
that
was
was my
jealous of your
cautionary
good
tale.
idea.
That was my cautionary tale to see that backyard. I'm like, uh-oh. And I am, really aggressive with pulling. I didn't really introduce myself, but I have a background in ecology and public health, environmental health. And I was on the healthy lawn team for many, many years in Madison. And so I tend to avoid the pesticides. So I'm trying it. I'm not, I think, when used, integrated pest management and lots of PPE but I am attempting to do it without. But I don't think that mine were as established. And so I do think that that was fortunate to really research what plants you're putting in from the beginning. I should have known better. But I made a mistake and I think I've caught it, but you guys had a harder task to do.
I would
But
just
sharing
like
your
to say,
story was helpful to see that and know that like this could impact these woods and that's really against a lot of the work that I've done in the past. So I should have known better. Anyway. Yeah.
well, it's not like they put a warning label on these things. It's unfortunate. I wish that our state government was a little bit more forthright about keeping people from selling these invasive exotics. I'm going to stop sharing now. And there we are. Okay. And I'm just checking in the chat. Lisa says that they used Procellacor on the Eurasian millfield in their lake 5 years ago. And as of this year, had only harvested a handful of plants that were returned. Pretty good
That was
deal.
based on Tom's comment about his lake having milfoil on it. I have a question though. I'm in the mountains in New York, and I accidentally introduced some vinca into a perennial garden, and now it's in an area between a driveway and a rock wall. And next year I tend to rip everything out and start again in that garden because it's just everywhere. But I wanted to do it in one season. Do you think between spraying and then going back and maybe putting straw down and burning and just scorching everything would get me there? I plan
Well,
to raise the garden up about another 8 to 10 inches after I do that, but I don't know if you thought it would be foolish to plant that same year.
so you're going to get rid of all the perennials in that garden as well then?
Yeah, everything's got, I'm just gonna get rid of everything. So I'm gonna, it's so entwined with the perennials. I'm gonna have to burn them. I don't know what else to do.
Well, if it were me, if you're able to pull off something like Tom did and have a thaw in winter when you can put down a broadleaf herbicide or an herbicide then when everything else is dormant, that would be ideal.
Yeah, we usually don't have a thaw until, I mean, the
Yeah.
ice usually doesn't go out to our lake till May, so we're
Well,
usually pretty
yeah,
cold.
it's kind of up to you then.
Yeah, maybe I could set up like a greenhouse over like, like clear plastic on top of it and make it warmer in that area.
Mhm.
That might work too. I wasn't thinking about that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a downside to laying plastic. It does cook the soil. There's no way to kill a whole bunch of stuff without having some sort of after effect.
And I
But
made compost to fill in, and I have, soil saved up to go back in there. So,
I depends on how fast you want to go and how comfortable you are using chemicals.
well, it's,
Yeah.
it's right in front of my house, so it's kind of the first thing everybody sees when they come in. So I didn't want it to leave it dirt, scorched earth for a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know if you thought it would be, if stuff would be coming back
Mm-hmm.
after, spraying and then burning maybe a month later or something.
I wonder if you could pull it. You was talking about adding soil and compost anyway. If you pull it, put down a layer of cardboard and then put your new soil and compost on top and add an aggressive ground cover, you might be fine.
That's a
Yeah,
good. That's
I
nice.
think that's a good idea. If you could put, if you're gonna put enough, if you're raising it up the amount that you said, having that impenetrable barrier for where the vinca can't get through, that'll help quite a bit.
And then if it does pop through, which it did with me, just just kind of keep at it. Eventually, it just kind of goes away.
I think this is penance. During college, my sister and I ran a small landscaping business, and we specialized in Pachysandra, vinca, and all sorts of little ground covers. So I think this is like I'm paying for that now.
Well, it's your purgatory. I've got a question in the chat from Jane, was wondering the effect of chemical warfare on trees and the pagoda dogwood in the vicinity. I have not had I have not had trouble with my pagoda dogwood being affected. It is not really close to the area that I had treated. The things that really nail the pagoda dogwood are deer, so one time I let down my garden, there was fencing around it, and it was ajar, and they went in and stripped it. But other than that, it doesn't seem to be bothered by the applications on the surface.
Yeah, and for mine, of course, the tree was dormant at the time, but I was concerned about that. I didn't even want to get it on the bark anywhere near it, and so that's why I used the blue indicator so I could know exactly where I was placing any of the herbicide if there was any overspray or anything like that, because I was concerned about the trees that I was around as well.
Are there any more questions? Well then, folks, thank you so much for coming. And I will, I say you are more than welcome to stay for our meeting, but you certainly don't have to.
Well, Marcia, thank you for inviting me to talk tonight. I really appreciate it. I haven't had dinner yet, so I think I'm going to bail and go have some dinner. But I thank you. I appreciate the chats that we've had, and I look forward to working more together in the future.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. You gave a great presentation, and Danna, thank you as well.
All right. Well, thank you. So bye, everyone. Thank you for
Bye-bye.
listening.